Hey, everybody. I'm Tammy Kiekafer. I'm a licensed clinical social worker.
And I'm Desiree Grimaldi. Welcome to Unguarded Minds podcast, where we talk about all life's drama, trauma, and gritty things that it throws at us. Today, we have Cara with us as a special guest. She is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Colorado, and she's been working with in the mental health field since 2011. She has extensive clinical experience with children and families, and she views her therapeutic work from the family system approach and an attachment lens. But she is also specializes in postpartum anxiety and depression and things like that. And that is what she is going to talk about today to help all of our new mama listeners who maybe just don't know what's going on or don't know where to begin or don't even know what to look for. So we are super excited to have you and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here. I think it's really awesome that you all are doing this podcast, and it's really incredible work that you all are doing.
Yeah. So we wanted to dive in to the reality of postpartum. I think that people who haven't experienced it or haven't done research because they haven't experienced it or they don't know they have it, like tend to see postpartum through the lens of maybe the media or what things that are portrayed on TV or that aren't realistic to everybody. Those are some of more the extreme situations. So when you're a new mom, what are some things you would experience as postpartum? Like how would you even know that that's what it was and you weren't just turning into this worry wart of a parent, like just afraid of
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. I'm speaking from sort of clinical experience, and then also as a new mom myself and having gone through postpartum anxiety, and I didn't even know that I was experiencing it until, several months in, and the signs were all there, but I just kind of was white knuckling it and struggling through and not getting the support I needed. And I think if I couldn't be being in the field and knowing what to look for, and I couldn't even identify it, it kind of really blew my mind of, wow, I cannot be the only one struggling with this. There has to be other mamas um struggling and not knowing kind of what to look for. And so it made me really want to talk more about it and open in my experience, my personal experience, but then also being able to bring kind of my clinical experience and expertise to the conversation as well.
Well, I
And
think
yeah.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, some of the things that I had heard before I gave birth was like, oh, you'll cry for like 2 weeks. Don't be, just let yourself cry, let yourself cry. And so I was sort of expecting the mood drop of like depression. That was one thing I was looking for, and I didn't have that at all. And so I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm not experiencing anything, but I definitely was.
What
I
did
was
that
going to
look like?
say that too. Like you go into it and you're like, oh, it'll be fine. And just like you said, people say, just, be aware of the tears and everything's new and it's overwhelming and you're not sleeping. And then, and so, yeah, you're expecting it to just be a little snapshot, but it is not like that at all.
It is not. Yeah, and it's for way longer than, we think it is. It's not just the 3 month, or they say the fourth trimester is like that 3 months after they're born, and your hormones are still regulating so much longer than that. And yeah, and so some of the typical kind of before I went through postpartum myself, some of the typical things that I had learned clinically, right, was like there's this video where you see a mom having a flat, being with her child and having a flat affect. So just like kind of sullen, no smiling, no experience. And they show the child mirrors her flat affect, right? And then you see the mom smile and the baby, and they're showing mirror neurons, and then the baby smiles and lights up. And so this idea of, oh, well, if you're just, you're depressed, you have this sort of flat affect, and that's what postpartum depression is. But that can probably be part of it, but it's so much more. And then when you look at postpartum anxiety, um, it can come across in so many various ways. And different for anyone. And that's my little guy right now. He wants to join the conversation.
Do you want to go
grab him?
grab him?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right back.
So did you have postpartum depression or anxiety, Desiree?
No.
Nothing. Yeah.
No. So with my daughter, so I natural birth. um, so with my daughter though, I didn't get the epidural. And the nurse, I kept telling her, because I wasn't sure I wanted to do natural first time around. So I kept telling her, I said, call for my epidural, call for my epidural. And she's like, no, we have time. Well, I dilated like super quick. And by the time she was able to call for my epidural, it was too late. But she was giving me a shot of something. And my whole delivery of my daughter was so foggy. Like, I don't think I had postpartum, but for a couple weeks, I was like, this isn't real. Like, it's not real because I was so foggy. And well, one, I was told I couldn't have kids. So just that whole realization, like actually having a child. But then, because of whatever she was giving me. So with my son, when I went in, I was like, you are not to put an IV in me of any kind. No epidural, no pain med, no nothing. Like, we need to be very clear on this. So that birth was very different than the first one for me. But I don't think I had postpartum. I had a lot of different anxiety things that popped up. But it wasn't right after birth, like probably for the first 6 years of my kid's life. Well, if I'm being honest, it's probably like first 10 years. Like, I was scared to death to fly. I was never afraid to fly, but I was like, what if I die? Who's going to take care of them? Who's going to tell them? How are they going to react when they hear that I'm dead because the plane fucking crashed or whatever? So like that kind of stuff.
Those unrealistic, yeah, these things that come out of nowhere that are like, this is not reality, but yeah.
So this is August.
Yes, this is August. He's 9.5 months old, and he's just the best. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me, making me a mom. And I've learned so much.
I think when we were talking earlier before we started recording, you had said something about how you've got you've got this little capsule when you're pregnant, and it's like you're in control. You've got where your little one is, and it's whatever you eat, and you're taking care of yourself and what you're surrounding yourself with. That capsule leaves your body, and you're like, hold on a minute.
Yes.
Hold on. The world is immediately a different place. And then life actually hits you in the face.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is definitely what happened. I loved him. I mean, I think you just experience this like earth-shattering love for something outside of you. And it's so vulnerable. It's so vulnerable because this tiny little thing is now outside of you and depends on you 100%. And there's a trust you have to have. There's a trust in their being and their soul of like, they're here and they're strong enough to be here. And then there's a trust in yourself that you have to have. And then there's a trust in like the outside world. And I think that when we look clinically, at attachment and trust, and when young children come into my office, we do a young child trauma screen, right? And we ask about adverse experiences in young children. But then what's also really important too is to ask the parents about their adverse experiences in life. And what I mean by that is like when scary things have happened that have been out of our control, and that can be a variety of traumatic adverse experiences. And looking at that, it's really important, I think, so for me, I have had some, childhood adverse experiences, some traumatic things happen. And I had gone to therapy, many different cycles of therapy, and taken care of myself, and was sort of able to move through the world in okay, I have my skills. I can, sometimes I get triggered, and sometimes I feel scared and don't trust the world, but then I have my skills to be able to come back to myself and say, I'm not I'm not in that scary place anymore, right? Like, I am taken care of, the world is safe, and I can continue moving through it. But then when I had my baby, all of a sudden, all those skills were just poof, flown out the
Gonzo.
door, be dunzo, because my heart was literally outside of myself now, and I had never experienced that. I mean, no one does until they're, you just can't. Um, and all of a sudden, I needed new skills, um, and I didn't realize what I was going through. So I thought it was just kind of extreme care, right? Like this extreme amount of like, I just care so much. But I was really struggling, and it was really unhelpful to the people around me. And if I had just kind of known a little bit earlier, oh, this is just normalizing. This is actually postpartum anxiety. I need a little more support, some let's look at those skills again, and normalizing what's happening. Then I think I wouldn't have had to struggle for as long as I did and white knuckle it for as long as I did. So uh, w- and what that looked like for me was really sort of it. And a lot of people don't talk about this, and I didn't know, but it almost when you have a lot of postpartum anxiety, it also can come out in obsessive compulsive dis-
Mhm.
compulsions as well. So sort of the inability to stop thinking about him and his care, and
Mhm.
what he's eating, and just this kind of, my mind was always going about his care and is he okay, and it could never turn off. um and that was really wearing on me. And then also the inability, it was really hard. It still kind of is. I'm still working through it. It's but the kind of trusting others to take care of him, even my husband, his father, that was, I for the first couple of months, it was really hard for me to even leave the room. Um and then that came out in like a lot of micromanaging ways, like do this, do that, do it exactly my way. And that didn't go well for my marriage. No one really wants to be micromanaged.
The ripple effect.
The ripple effect, yeah. And so you add on, you know, everyone, we're new parents, sleep deprived, and then you add on kind of my over anxious, overstimulated, wanting to control everything brain, because me and him, if my brain, my trauma brain was going, if I don't make sure him and I are safe, then we won't be. That was my trauma brain that came back up of like, protect, or, hold on real tight. Um, I'm going to keep us safe. Like whatever I need to do, I'm going to keep us safe, and kind of white knuckle through it. Even though my world was safe, I still, like, I got thrown back into that 11-year-old brain where my world wasn't safe because something bad happened. And yeah, and so it was really hard. It was hard on my marriage, and it was hard on work, and it was the exact opposite of like caring, right? Like I was absolutely caring and engaged, but it was like obsessive. And it wore out, it wore me out in many layers. Um so taking care of myself, and getting some, going back to therapy and getting some of those skills, and reminding myself, grounding, and reminding myself, finding compassion for that 11-year-old girl who went through something really scary, but then also like, you're here now, and I am safe is a huge message that allows me to let go a little more.
Did
So
your,
go ahead, Des.
did your husband or other family, like, were they in the beginning kind of like, this isn't normal behavior for you? Like, what pushed you to think like, okay, I need that external help, like something
Ah,
isn't right?
that's a really good question. Yeah. So yeah, it was hard to identify because there's so much going on. You're sleep deprived and you're just like, what is happening? And when I finally reached out, and it was probably, yeah, it just is my experience, and it's fine. But it was his 4.5, maybe 4-month checkup. And he had, pretty much, he had lost he was always my baby. August has always been a small baby, but he dropped in percentile of weight. And, you know, the pediatrician was sort of encouraging me to add formula and supplement and all that. And my reaction to that was so extreme. Like, the pediatrician wasn't worried. She was just saying, add some supplemental bottles of formula, blah, blah, blah. And my reaction to it was just this complete desperation of, oh my God, my baby's not safe. I'm not safe and my baby's not safe, and something bad can happen. And it really affected my my mental health, like kind of just, and maybe that was some of the depression kicking in around. I remember that weekend when we got back from the doctor's office, I just couldn't get out of bed. I didn't want to care for him. And so that's why a lot of times postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression can live together. And
Did
that
she
was
pick
when
up on that? Did your doctor pick up on it and say like, hey, are you okay?
Yeah, because they do screen you, and I was answering, I think I was answering I was trying to answer pretty truthfully around that. And no, she wasn't able to pick up on that. I mean, it kind of happened after the appointment, but my husband and I, after that weekend, my husband and I were like, okay, I need to reach out and get a therapist and get some medicine for right now, just to kind of lift me out of this fog. But that was kind of our waking point of, hey, it was just like a little, it was just a little road bump, but my reaction to it was so severe. That's when we kind of knew.
And so did your husband say anything to you up until that 4-month mark, or even, family members? I think
Sure.
is that what you were asking, Desiree? As far
Yeah.
as like, were other people noticing it?
Aware of it.
Yeah, because you were saying like the obsessive compulsiveness and like,
the micromanaging.
yeah, like that was abnormal behavior for you. So my husband be like, what is your problem? Like, what are you doing? What's happening?
Yeah, for sure. And I think he did, but it was also so like, we were just in it. Like, is this Cara just as a new mom? Is this Cara just being annoying? We weren't able to really identify it together. We knew something was going on, but we weren't able to put a name on it until I sought therapy and counseling.
And anxiety is one of those contagious emotions. And, did your husband also, like, if you guys couldn't really put your finger on what was going on, I'm wondering, did he start to feel a little anxious? You were so anxious, and then the OCD kind of kicks in, and that's just typically what happens. And yeah, did he get anxious? Or I think your mom, I don't remember when your mom came out and stayed with you. I didn't know if that kind of.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
thinking?
I think really probably he was getting anxious, but what really was one of the symptoms that happened between him and I is we just were arguing a lot more than, than normal. Um, and that trust, right? Like it would be the silliest little nitpickiest things of the bottle wasn't warm enough or, and then I would sort of be so obsessed and focused on that. And it would be, and for me, it was just coming out of this pure like anxiety caring for my child. I didn't see it as ill intent. But then how he received that was, I'm not good enough, right? To my husband, like, and then that, of course, yeah, he's a new dad. He's trying to figure it out. That, of course, spiked, I'm sure, more feelings of, I don't know, he wouldn't name it as anxiety, but it's sort of not being good enough, which is never a nice, as no man wants to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And feeling like, he wasn't, being able to provide in this way of meeting my needs, which were just, my needs weren't able to be met. Like they were just so, I wanted the bottle at exact temperature at exact time, and you just couldn't do that. It was impossible.
I think part of the struggle too that people would maybe be able to see, like you said, like the doctor does screenings and stuff, but like when you're a new mom, it's almost scary to answer them because you're like, are they going to take my kid? Are they going to think I'm crazy? Are they going to think I'm unfit? Are they going to judge me? Are they going to, and like, you're so overwhelmed that a lot of people don't answer those questions honestly. And, and I think that's a whole systematic thing of like lost trust there. But, I think that a lot of it probably goes missed or undiagnosed because people are too afraid to answer certain questions.
Absolutely. And, and one of the symptoms was like, oftentimes when we're having such intense postpartum anxiety and depression that, so, self-harm, thoughts of self-harm is very real, because you're just so, all of this is so inside and you want a relief somehow. And so that is screened out, have you thought of harming yourself or harming others? And, I think just that's normal to think I'm at my end's rope. I just need a relief or a release. But then correct. Yeah. If I mark this in my doctor's office, what will happen? Right. And hopefully it would be, hey, here's a referral to a therapist who specializes in postpartum anxiety. And, you can talk to your primary about getting on some medication just to get you through this or whatever. But, that would be terrifying, right? If I say yes to this, would a phone call to DHS happen? That would be so scary.
And
there's
then
really
that triggers your, I can't protect, I'm not
Yeah.
safe, you're not safe.
Right.
I think
Right.
anxiety of like an umbrella, and then there's all these offshoots of it. So you mentioned OCD, obsessive compulsive behavior, perfectionism. So I think here, new mom, I can do this. I've got this. I'm not going to skip a beat. I'm still going to keep a clean house. I'm still going to be able to do my job. I'm still going to be able to do all these things. And then someone says, how you doing? Are you thinking of any self-harm? And you're like, no, I'm not, I'm fine. Everything's fine. I'm strong. So a lot of overcompensation.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And for me, and I think we, just looking at what are different, as a mom, what your different situations are. But for me, my anxiety and just knowing this, my anxiety really increased when I did go back to work after 12 weeks. And I breastfed when he was born up until that 12 weeks. And then at 12 weeks, I attempted to, pump while I was away from him. And I think everyone has different situations. For me, because he lost weight kind of right around that time. So I was always worried about, am I pumping enough? When I get home, where's my milk? Are we in line, right? Did I just pump an hour ago and do I have milk supply now? And I continued that for about until 6 months, but it really took, looking back, it took such a toll on my mental health that I might have done something different. I might have said, at 12 weeks, as I go back to work, we're just going to move to formula so that I can be present, for myself and my baby and my family and my husband. Um, that for me was just too much to balance around trying to work. And I was just constantly worried about him and his food and if he was getting enough. And so that really kind of went back to that core, one of those core needs is food, right? And safety. And it really just, it triggered that safety instinct in me. So that's something that we don't really talk about that much, the pressure of breastfeeding and then going back to work and just how to balance all of that. And it was, it felt close to impossible when
Mhm.
I was going through it.
And then breastfeeding actually postpones the regulation of your hormones.
Yes. Yes.
So it's like you're
It's-
choosing to do what they say is best for your kid, but will ultimately prolong you feeling normal again. I did not breastfeed. I lived in Florida when I had both my kids, and I just could not get it out of my head. I was like, that's just not sanitary. It's like 110 degrees here all the time. Like, I'm not doing it.
yeah.
Not for us. But but yeah, I mean, so and maybe that's why, not that that's the only reason, but like I didn't experience postpartum, but I didn't breastfeed. So my body kind of regulated, I'm sure a
Mhm.
little quicker than somebody who did because
Yes.
hormones were able to bounce
You're
right.
still, hormones are wild. Yeah. I think after I stopped, stopped pumping at 6 months. I mean, I had therapy regular. I have therapy regularly, but he's about 9 months, and now I'm just feeling like, oof,
There is
a
so
bit.
much pressure
There's,
around, yeah. Should I not? If you do, you got to keep your milk supply up. You got to get back to work. Life happens, it just, I think, yeah, I remember that's pretty much all I ever thought about was
yeah,
them, the kids sleeping. Like, when am I going to pump? When am I going to feed? How long's this been in the freezer? Do we have a supply? I mean, it just is so consuming to think that you're gonna add a little bit of, when your anxiety is out of control, there's absolutely zero logic in anxiety. So so then I think that was even harder when people would come along and say like, "My God, you've got this milk supply of whatever in the freezer, you're fine." That was a little too much logic for my brain, and it just didn't even compute. It was like they were speaking German and I was speaking French. It's like
mm,
I couldn't hear that logic, when you've got that anxiety. Yeah, but you're right. I mean,
absolutely.
basic needs, food, and mhm.
Mhm.
We're not meant to do all things.
No.
Right?
Um, and I think that that's a pressure, and it kind of goes to some things that Tammy teaches, and like that confidence of you don't need to be living up to what your neighbor does, the kids play group moms, that what Pinterest, what TikTok, what you don't need to live up to that. Like for me, I was very okay with being like, it's 110 degrees and I'm dripping wet and I don't want my kid under my shirt. Like I'm
Mhm.
okay with that, and you're not going to foot their medical bill, so you really don't get an opinion. Like, you know,
Yeah.
then I think it's okay, and not enough people feel that way. That they feel
Yeah,
like they have to do
absolutely.
all these things, and you hear people, well, that's what women did back then, but women didn't work back then. They didn't have full-time careers and businesses, and you know, I don't know. We're just not meant to do all things. Nobody is, and you
No,
just gotta
and
pick and choose what's most important to you. And
yeah, and being able to be, it's so hard not to compare, right? As a first time mom, you hear all these other stories. Well, I pumped exclusively for a year. All the different stories, and they're in your head. It's sort of like birth too. Like you ask about birth stories and then you're like, wait, I don't want
Right.
to hear any more birth stories. Um, but finding that, and for my postpartum anxiety and depression, I was becoming very rigid. Like my thinking was becoming so rigid. And I think that can be something to look out for if we're like,
Mm.
were we able to go with the flow and be flexible and sort of be malleable? Was that how we used to think? And then all of a sudden it's like it's very rigid, and if this exact thing doesn't happen, then I'm going to lose my cool. I think that can be a really good symptom, kind of this is not just me being sleep deprived, or this is postpartum anxiety. Like I'm becoming yeah, very, very rigid thinking, and not being able to kind of, right, back to Desiree, what you were saying is that we have to be flexible. We're making the rules up as we go. Like what works for our family? Are we going back to work? Are we, um, being adaptable and flexible, and having that malleable brain. And that can be really hard when we're in postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression.
And I think it's normal to compare. I
Yeah.
think it's what you do with it. But yeah, how you don't know what to do. So you're reading all the books and you're listening to the podcast and you're reading blogs and you're on websites and you're trying to incorporate, like my doctor said this, but this group says this. I mean, you just don't know. So I think that it's absolutely normal to go out and get as much information as you possibly can. But your experience is your own experience. And I think that's where you're saying kind of know where to draw that line of here's all of my data. Now, given myself and my belief system and my family and my circumstances, what's going to work the best for me? And then you go through cafeteria try style and you try something. But that
Yeah.
flexibility is where you get to modify, like, all right, we've tried this and clearly it's not working. What's our plan B? What's our plan C? It's
And finding compassion for ourselves in that was a huge, when my therapist and I were working on is, being having compassion for myself and my own inner self-talk. I was so critical, that self-critic of I'm not doing enough, or I'm not doing what the next person said, or I'm not reaching the goal of I wanted to breastfeed for a year, and it's like I didn't, and that kind of changing that self-talk through there when I was, in therapy of I'm so strong and I'm such a survivor, and I have a flourishing career, and I'm like I just forgot all those positive things in myself, because I was just like I was always looking at what I wasn't doing. And we can kind of get in a loop when we're just in our own head. It's really
right.
good to be reflected something else back.
I was just thinking, I remember when I had my first son and having a private practice, I don't get time off or anything. And you work so hard to build your private practice that if you are like, well, I'm going to take 12 weeks, it's almost like you got to start over. And I was newer into my practice. And I remember being in the hospital bed, and I don't think we had texting back then. So I was on the phone returning calls. And I'm like, yep, I can get you scheduled. Like, I just had a baby, but I'm looking at maybe like 3 weeks. And I remember my client was like, I'm hanging up right now. Why are you talking to me? And it was just my second nature of like, I got this.
Yes, I got it. I can do it all. I've got it.
Yeah, and that just the fact that you called it postpartum anxiety. Honest to God, I've never heard of that term. I don't know why you hear postpartum depression. I know depression and anxiety go together, but when you said that, I was like, well, no kidding. Like I had way the anxiety end of it, and I think that like another offshoot that you talked about was the overprotective. And I was thinking like, the whole everyone's got an opinion, but oh, you're a helicopter mom. Oh, you're just let him be, let him do the thing. um God, it's just like that term, I don't know, it just gets under my skin because like you just don't get it and what's happening in your
all.
brain. Exactly. Yeah. So I was
telling me
thinking,
I already am so self-critical. I don't need you to criticize me and tell me I'm
and
too
now I
obsessed with my
suck as a
child.
mom.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
That's
think interesting too, like in the people that you're asking the questions to. Um, you speak about trauma. I have my own set of trauma, but like there are certain people in my family I would never go to and be like, what could I expect, or what could I like? I just know to do everything opposite of what you did. So I don't need any opinions from you. Like
Mhm.
knowing who to trust and who to get that advice
Mhm.
from. Um, I was very thankful. I had a nurse practitioner when I was pregnant with my daughter. And I think a lot of that pressure comes from, she was fantastic, but everybody else, I think a lot of that pressure too comes from your pregnancy and the stuff that the
Yeah.
doctors push and the
Yes.
expectations. Um,
Yes.
I was what was considered by some an irresponsible pregnant person because I refused all the tests. I didn't do the diabetes test. I didn't do I didn't do any. I'm like, for what? For what?
Mhm.
Well, I have no symptoms, so I'm not going to
Mhm.
drink that nastiness. But then the other one to see if the baby had Down syndrome, I'm like, why would I do that? It's not going to
Mhm.
change. Like, you are going to stress me out. And I talked to the nurse practitioner, and she's like, 90% of the time it comes back false positive. I'm like, see, why would you even offer that to somebody? You're going to make me stress and have the worst pregnancy ever if it comes back with a false positive. Not going to change anything. But even into delivery, like they have the nursing person come in and try and set, and you're already uncomfortable in your own skin. And now this person's pawing at you and trying to stick your baby out. And it's like, just leave me alone. Just give me 10 minutes. I just pushed a human out of me. Like, leave me
Yes.
so there's
Yeah.
just so much pressure through pregnancy, through the delivery,
Absolutely.
that it's like, no wonder you feel overwhelmed and all that.
Yes.
Like, I don't know.
And looking back, I was most definitely experiencing anxiety during my pregnancy as well. I just kind of white knuckled it through again. But what happened, and I think it's so normal is uh, my body was changing. That was completely out of my control, and I needed certain foods, and the exercise, like the way that I moved my body was completely different. And trauma lives in our body, right? These experiences, we store them in our body, and so it was coming up. It probably accumulated in the postpartum picture, but looking back, and if I do have if I do this again, I'm so going to, use my therapist throughout pregnancy and postpartum, just to have that there for me. And I'm lucky, I'm really lucky that my health insurance, that I have that, that my health insurance covered that. So I know that sometimes therapy is not always, I think we're getting a lot better, but I also understand that it's not always accessible. But luckily my health insurance covered it. But in the future, I think that's really normal to go through as our bodies are going through changes during pregnancy, to have some mental health stuff come up too.
I mean,
There's a
people
lot
do
of parents.
premarital counseling. There should be
Pre-
pre-baby counseling, I mean, because you're right. You don't, I think that you brought up such a good point around your own trauma, and Desiree, we talked a lot about how you grew up and your family's support system. And it's like, yeah, I think when you get pregnant, you're like, oh my gosh, I got to set my doctor appointments, and now we've got to start planning, and I've got to go shopping, and I've got to get the room and my shower and da da da. And just like, but it's like, whoa,
what about
you
my
know, what are
oh,
exactly?
yeah.
What am I going to be bringing into it? You just don't think about it. And I think maybe that's why it's almost like you hit a wall, because it catches you off guard, because you don't know how you're going to respond. And anxiety is all about not having a sense of control over your environment. So,
100%.
kabam.
Kabam. Exactly.
When we had Gianna, me and Jesse had a plan. Like, I was like, you are not to leave her side. Nobody is to take her out of the room by themselves under any like, we had a plan in place. But I remember the delivery. I had Jesse, his mom, and my mother in the room. And even like when the baby comes out, everybody leaves you. Like you're laying there. They all follow with the baby, which again, I had told Jesse too, but my mother-in-law, she stayed right there. And I was like, what's wrong? Why are you like, she's like, everybody, like you still need support. You still need somebody
Yes. Yes.
like by you. And so my mother-in-law stayed next to me until like my husband made sure everything was okay with my daughter and whatever. But I was like, she ain't even like my biological mother. But like she was like, no, you need a person too.
Checking on the mama.
So true.
But it's like even that, like, I don't know. Everybody, even the nurses, they come in, they're checking on the baby. They're not checking on you very much. They're like, oh
You
yeah,
do
you're
feel
like,
kind of
fine.
abandoned, don't you? Like everything's all about your appointments, and then all of a sudden you have the baby, and they're like, I think that and maybe it's getting better now. I don't know, Carrie, you might know. Is it getting better to where people are checking in more with the mamas?
Oh, I mean, I love my birth was amazing, and I mean, I had the most amazing, incredible. But I think what really helped is we did hire a doula to be with us, and we did so much emotional processing, and that helped so much even before like at the end of my pregnancy. So maybe I'm like a little, what's the word? I kind of have the combined support of like I remember the nurses, and then I had her emotional support.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that together I didn't in that moment, the birth and like that was incredible. Like that didn't feel like lacking for me. It was like, when I went back to work, and that was when it was just like, how do
So maybe it's just like making sure that you're being proactive then is kind of what I'm hearing of. Like, yeah, have your therapist ahead of time, get into some
Yes.
counseling, have your
That's what I would
supports,
do.
and then
Yeah, like
maintain
looking
that.
back.
Yeah.
Looking back, I would have been like, oh, I'm experiencing like anxiety during pregnancy, have that, throughout my pregnancy, and then having it through postpartum.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think, and then just being like aware that constantly worrying about your babe and not being able to think of anything else, that's not just, I think moms worry, but that constant worry and just not being like literally not being able to think of anything else, then that's a sign of like, oh, this is and hormonally, oh my goodness, it's not just like, it's not just because we're anxious, like our hormones are playing such a big role in the way we regulate our emotions too.
Yeah.
But-
I mean, I always think therapy is the first and best choice, but I think today too, like there's so many parent groups, new mom groups, hospitals typically have like expecting mom groups. So if you aren't in a position to get, to a therapist, definitely reach out because the hospital and like OBGYN clinics and stuff, they do typically have a lot of support groups.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I went to and when there was a breastfeeding support group, which was great. It was free of charge. We could go every week, and that was really part of my routine, and it really helped, and see everyone and all that, and that I think that in thinking back, I think that helped keep my mental health to get kind of in check. But then it was really hard to keep those same structures of support in once I went back to work. And how did I manage it all? And then it kind of like, whoa, how do I balance all of this? But that once a week support group, I think did a lot.
So I think you're looking at awareness, try to second guess yourself, almost create your own checklist. There's got to be checklists out there like am I being too rigid? Am I being flexible enough? How's my sleep? Am I being snippy? Am I being short-tempered? Micromanaging. There's got to be some checklists out there that people can use as far as a validation tool. Like it doesn't just have to be like this. Yeah, these are super common symptoms, but it doesn't you don't have to white knuckle it. and
Right.
and don't second guess yourself. If it's a feeling that you're having, pay attention to it, because especially with anxiety, it doesn't just go away.
No. Right. No, it does not. And it's a work in progress, and it gets easier over time, but it's like it's waves, you know. You're like, oh, I went through that kind of minor panic attack, but okay, it was a little shorter this time, or I was able to, do some tapping and walk away and not have an hour-long argument with my husband instead. It's like little bite size pieces of better health, you know.
So what are like 3 pieces of advice you would give to women, new mamas
Yeah.
who are, that's it, 3 pieces of advice around what we're talking
Oh,
about, putting you on the
about
spot.
our mental health around, pregnancy and postpartum. Oh man. What would have wanted to hear? And it's a feeling you don't, it's so unique. I think everyone's journey is so unique and so theirs, and you're going to survive. You're strong. Your baby's strong, and you're going to survive no matter what.
Awesome.
Yeah. And then past that, just trust yourself, trust your intuition, trust yourself, and that you're worth the support. You're worth, some extra, I don't even want to call it help, right? Because we're giving so much, but you're worth everything that you need, and you're strong, you're worth it, and we're survivors.
And you deserve to be a priority.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what I'm hearing
And
you say.
yeah.
Cool. Well, good. Yeah, if there's, so do you have any, you're working for an agency, do you have links that you want us to attach, or just kind of basic resources that people, I know we're in Colorado, but are there?
Yeah, can I
Yeah,
take a little time and then send those to you?
absolutely. Yep. We'll just, when we get them from you, if you get a chance, we'll just link them.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, that's awesome.
Well, thank you so much, Cara. It was great to see you. August is absolutely adorable. He's just got the cutest little smile.
That smile.
And if any new moms have any questions, they could drop them below and we can get the answers for you. And we will also provide the resources that Cara sends us.
Yes, yes, I'll I'll get those to you.
All right. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies. Thank you for everything you do.
Yes.